Li Tai had been astonishingly powerful, almost reaching the divine martial realm. Li Xuantu had been slightly weaker, but he was still at the grotto heaven realm. Li Xuantu had believed that Li Tai's favored successor would at least be at the subtle realm, perhaps even higher. But to his surprise, Li Heng was only at the Saint Martial realm. But you've got rather strong dragon chi. This should be thanks to that sword and the throne, Li Xuantu indifferently said as he reached out with his other hand. Clang! The Son of Heaven's sword rose into the air and into his hand. But when Li Xuantu gripped it, the Son of Heaven's sword fiercely shuddered, erupting with light and immense strength. Howling sword chi pressed against Li Xuantu, attempting to push away from him. This was the divine sword rejecting Li Xuantu's control. It was obvious that the Son of Heaven's sword had already recognized a master. Humph! Li Tai is no longer here, and yet this lifeless sword dares to oppose this prince. Sensing the strong resistance from the sword, Li Xuantu reached out with his hand, his eyes going cold. Spacetime trembled as black halos of spacetime manifested between his fingers. As his fingers clenched, the light erupting from the Son of Heaven's sword was extinguished. The sword sealed as he closed his grip around it. Everyone else in the area instantly turned gloomy upon seeing this. The Son of Heaven's sword was the Sage Emperor's personal sword. In the rebellion of the three princes, the Sage Emperor had unleashed an attack so shocking that even gods and devils were forced to bow their heads. Divine swords had spirits of their own. This divine sword had soaked in the Sage Emperor's stellar energy for several decades and had long ago developed its own intelligence. No one except the Son of Heaven could easily control it. But with Li Xuantu's frightening strength, he had managed to seal the sword. With the divine sword in hand, Li Xuantu turned his attention back to Li Heng and coldly said, "Li Heng, I will give you one chance to rectify your father's mistake. Immediately draft a decree announcing to the realm that your imperial father was cruel and tyrannical, using schemes and despicable methods to seize this prince's throne, in addition defying Emperor Gaozong's will. Immediately announce your imperial father's crimes to the realm and say that you are ashamed of him, that you are willing to abdicate your throne to me and raise me up as sovereign. As you are also of imperial blood, I might be able to spare your life." Li Xuantu's callous voice rang out over Taiji Palace, entering everyone's ears. Everyone was both shocked and enraged, particularly the dragon guards. Their faces turned red as they clenched their swords and glared. The dragon guards were elite soldiers personally raised up by the Sage Emperor. They were loyal guards who revered the Sage Emperor and could not allow him to be so humiliated. If not for the fact that Li Xuantu had Li Heng's life in his hands, the dragon guards would have already heedlessly rushed Li Xuantu. "Stop! Release His Majesty!" They were filled with rage, but they were worried that reckless actions would hurt Li Heng. "He wants to be emperor." Wang Chong was stunned by this declaration, but as Li Heng was still in the enemy's hands, he did not dare to act recklessly. "I have to find a way to impede him," Wang Chong said to himself. Li Xuantu's body had powerful ripples of spacetime, exerting a significant pressure on Wang Chong. Wang Chong understood that he was no match for Li Xuantu on his own. Wang Chong got in touch with his three divine embryos while his mind began to think of countermeasures. He stepped forward and began to speak. "Your Highness Crown Prince, you've learned the arts of a sovereign and have studied the histories. Even Emperor Gaozong was full of praise for your highness. Since ancient times, the heir apparent has never been selected based purely on strength, but based on character, virtue. Only by choosing a person with the appropriate character for the position can the longevity of the throne be ensured. This is how Taizi, Taizong, and Gaozong all chose their successors. This junior had not been born when the divine dragon coup took place, so he cannot pass judgment. But when the Sage Emperor inherited the throne, the country was at peace, the military was strong, and the Great Tang's territory was expanded to an unprecedented level. All the people of the Central Plains sang odes in praise of him. The Sage Emperor is known as the Eternal Sovereign not because he granted himself the title, but because the people of the realm all revered and supported him. Though His Majesty is still young, the entire world praises his character and virtue. Though he has been on the throne for a short time, he is diligent and hardworking, neglecting food and sleep. And the realm has flourished, everything proceeding in an orderly manner. His Majesty shows signs of a wise sovereign, and he has the respect and adoration of all the people of the realm. A country does not exist for a single person, and the realm does not belong to a single man. If your Highness Crown Prince wishes to sit upon the throne, you should do so through your own actions and ability, obtaining the respect and admiration of the people so that they acknowledge you as emperor, not seize it through force, treating the realm and people as your own personal possessions. If you rely on improper methods, then even if you obtain the throne and realm, you will eventually lose them, and your name will be cursed by the people for the rest of time. Wang Chong's unhurried and confident step rang out in front of Taiji Palace. Everyone turned to Wang Chong, including Li Xuantu. Humph! Absolute nonsense. Li Xuantu coldly sneered, his eyes full of contempt. If martial might is no good, then how did this prince lose the throne? How did Li Tai keep me imprisoned beneath the imperial prison for several decades? Brat, on account of the words you spoke to me down there, this prince will spare your life. But if you continue to speak such nonsense, then this prince will have to be callous. Li Xuantu still had some consideration for Wang Chong. Wang Chong had been willing to conditionally release him, and though his help had not been required, the proposal still made Li Xuantu treat him somewhat differently from others. Of course, his kindness had a limit. Your Highness Crown Prince, you might not know this, but the imperial court is currently facing enemies on all sides. Li Linfu did not have good intentions when he colluded with the men in black to release you. I do not know what they promised you, but those men in black have planted a man called Inauthentic in Yuzhou to the northeast, gathering around him an immense force. The imperial court has just gone through a reshuffling, and the sage emperor only recently passed. If something happens to His Majesty at a time like this and discord arises in the court, the enemy will have the perfect chance to strike. At that time, Yuzhou, Goguryeo, and the Eastern Turkic Khaganate will join together and strike into the heartland, plunging the Great Tang into the fires of war. Your Highness is also of imperial blood. Are you really willing to see this hard-won prosperity lost? Moreover, the men in Black harbor ill intentions. They only released your Highness to use your Highness. If they really planned to support your Highness, why would they have an extra in Yuzhou? The men in black cannot be trusted. Your Highness cannot fall for their schemes. Wang Chong sternly said, at the same time secretly shooting a glance at Li Heng. Li Xuantu was powerful, so the first priority was to hold him down in some way and then think of another plan. Do you think this prince doesn't know of what you speak of? Li Xuantu coldly laughed, not taking Wang Chong's words to heart. But this prince has always carried out what he has promised. No matter what sort of scheme they have, that will be for after this brat abdicates and this prince is enthroned. Brat, are you done thinking? Immediately draft a decree announcing Li Tai's crimes, and this prince might spare your life. Otherwise, your only fate is death, Li Xuantu coldly said, his fingers tightening their grip. Li Heng continued to struggle as his face turned red and breathing became difficult. But all Li Xuantu's words had served to do was enrage Li Heng. Impossible! Li Heng bellowed. Imperial Father was wise and benevolent, as the entire realm knows. Li Xuantu, you are obstinate and opinionated, far too selfish. If the realm fell into your hands, it would be your plaything, torn by factional strife, and all to satisfy your personal desire. In that war of the princes, you were far too selfish, considering anyone who was not part of your faction as an enemy, not caring about their importance or status, whether they would be of benefit or harm to the country. You were willing to resort to any methods to eliminate your opposition. But Imperial Father was different. Besides those extremely wicked scoundrels, he placed the realm above all. Of those officials who followed you, 80% lived and became vital officials of the court. On this aspect alone, Li Xuantu, how could you compare to Imperial Father? The Son of Heaven guards the gate of the country, and the sovereign bleeds for its people. Whether sovereign or common folk, everyone has only one life. If you want us to bend the knee, craving life and fearing death, and abdicate the throne to you, then this is impossible, Li Heng fearlessly declared. Shit! Wang Chong was shocked. Li Xuantu was arrogant, and if Li Heng had spoken with a gentler tone, he might have been able to buy some time. But Li Heng's mention of the past had provoked Li Xuantu's hatred and killing intent. Ha. Okay. As expected, in the face of Li Heng's fearlessness, Li Xuantu angrily laughed. His body trembled and his robes flapped around him as his stellar energy stirred the surrounding air into a gale. It seems that you really don't fear death, to dare speak this way to this prince. But what does it matter if you don't fear death? Weren't you speaking about the realm, its people, and the court? But cannot fearing death protect the people? Li Xuantu coldly laughed, his eyes filled with disdain. Li Xuantu waved a hand, unleashing a black halo of spacetime that sank into Li Heng's body. He then tossed Li Heng to the ground. At the same time, Li Xuantu took from Li Heng a golden dragon token that represented the emperor. A sliver of stellar energy entered the golden dragon token, and the token exploded with the brilliance of the sun. And as Li Xuantu activated the token, the ground in front of Taiji Palace trembled as if it was resonating with the token. Not good. Wang Chong immediately sensed the miniature 9 provinces domain and the 9 heavens, 10 earths, 3 emperors formation resonating with the golden token. That's the core that controls the 3 emperors formation. Wang Chong instantly realized what the golden dragon token was. Wang Chong had always taken that token the sage emperor had left for Li Heng to represent the emperor, and Li Heng had never mentioned it before. It was clear that Li Heng had not known, nor had Wang Chong ever imagined, that it would be the key to the 3 emperors formation. Li Xuantu possessed transcendent strength, had the blood of the House of Li, and knew the secret method of controlling the formation, so he had seized control of the 3 emperors formation without the slightest impediment. Senior, no? Wang Chong lunged forward in alarm, not caring about anything else. As he did, he flicked his finger, sending a bolt of sword chi at the golden dragon token in Li Xuantu's hand. Life execution. Wang Chong used the art of god and demon obliteration without hesitation. The 9 heavens 10 earths 3 emperors formation wasn't just maintaining the various formations and seals of the imperial palace, it was also the energy core for the miniature 9 provinces domain. If the domain were broken, there would be nothing left to stop Genesis Supreme, and the capital would be defenseless to the Celestial God Organization. But despite Wang Chong's best efforts, he was too late. Not knowing your own strength. Space trembled as Li Xuantu clenched his left hand into a fist and punched, shattering Wang Chong's God-Demon Obliteration sword chi. Meanwhile, his right hand gripped the golden dragon token, clenched into a fist wreathed with space-time energy, and punched into the earth. The 9 heavens, 10 earths, 3 emperors formation was linked to the fortune of the empire, and successive dynasties, rather than destroying it, had reinforced it. This led the outer layer of the 3 emperors formation to be covered in layers of formations and seals. Trying to break these numerous layers through brute force was not something a normal martial artist could do. This formation's original purpose was to not be broken by outsiders. Although Li Heng had the dragon token that served as the core of the formation, he was far too weak. A Saint Martial Realm Cultivation was not enough to control the formation. But Li Xuantu was different. As the renowned crown prince who had enjoyed Gaozong's favor, Li Xuantu knew the formation like the back of his hand, so he could easily break it. Boom! A moment later, as Li Xuantu's fist smashed down, a massive boom came from beneath Taiji Palace. The entirety of the imperial palace, even the entire capital, fiercely shuddered, the ground shaking as if on the verge of cracking apart. It's over. Wang Chong's heart turned cold. With his control over the miniature 9 provinces domain, he was able to sense activity across the capital. But at this moment, this sensation rapidly faded away as if Wang Chong was shedding a layer of skin. Crack! With a thunderclap and a howl of wind, stellar energy scattered in all directions, and the miniature 9 provinces domain that had enclosed the entire capital was completely opened. Ha ha ha! Good! Outside the capital, in the darkness, wind howled down from the heavens, causing the robes on Genesis Supreme and the Tianfu Divine Lord to loudly flap. The moment has finally come. Li Xuantu, this god did not help you in vain. Tianfu, it's our turn to take the stage. Genesis Supreme heartily laughed as he stepped forward, space vibrating as white gold halos of spacetime manifested in the air. Genesis Supreme grabbed the Tianfu Divine Lord's shoulder, and the two of them vanished through Genesis Supreme's spacetime passage. Now that the three emperors' formation had been destroyed, not only had the miniature 9 provinces domain been destroyed, so had all the various other formations inside and outside of the imperial palace. Without any energy to support them, these formations and seals were mere decorations. Kill! As the domain was broken, Fuming Lingcha, Duan Juyen, and Huang Tianzhao arrived with the escapees from the imperial prison. When they saw the situation at Taiji Palace, they were all stunned. But when they saw the restrained figure of Li Heng near Li Xuantu, they understood. Ha! His Highness Crown Prince has already successfully captured Li Heng. The day has come for a change in government in the Great Tang. Protect His Highness Crown Prince. May His Highness live 10,000 years. His Highness Crown Prince is the true emperor of our Great Tang. The prisoners cheered again and again, as loud as the roaring of the waves. Silence! A thunderous bellow broke out, dizzying the prisoners and causing them to stagger. Fuming Lingcha, you've truly got some luck. To think that you're still alive. Around 70 feet from Li Xuantu, Wang Chong shot his gaze over to Fuming Lingcha and Huang Tianzhao. Wang Chong, don't get cocky. Fuming Lingcha's face turned green, unable to vent his rage. What did he mean by to think that you're still alive? It was absurd. If not for him, would he have been in his present situation? Wang Chong, don't get too arrogant, Huang Tianzhao barked. Today? Wang Chong had no time for them, thrusting out a palm. Great yin-yang art. Images of the sun and moon manifested and flew through the air, hurtling toward Fuming Lingcha, Duan Juyen, and Huang Tianzhao. Only when Wang Chong struck did they all sense just how frighteningly powerful he was. His attack like a tsunami that would crush them into oblivion. The energy was utterly suffocating. Careful! Fuming Lingcha, Duan Juyen, and Huang Tianzhao all attacked the sun and moon manifestations, their hearts thumping in dismay. Ah! But a moment later, they screamed as Wang Chong's stellar energy made impact, blasting away Fuming Lingcha, Duan Juyen, Huang Tianzhao, and the numerous prisoners behind them like so many autumn leaves. In the face of supreme power, these people couldn't even take a single blow. How could this be? When did he get this strong? Fuming Lingcha was the most shocked. He could sense Wang Chong's overwhelming strength, and his mind was sent reeling, not daring to believe his eyes. He knew that Wang Chong had matured over the last few years, but Fuming Lingcha had not entered the capital in the rebellion of the three princes. Thus, he did not know just how powerful Wang Chong had become, so powerful that not even the combined might of him, Duan Juyen, and Huang Tianzhao could take one blow from him. Careful! Retreat! The cheering escapees instantly devolved into fear and panic. It was as if some invisible barrier had appeared in front of them, a minefield that they did not dare to cross. Ha! Truly impressive. An arrogant laugh tinged with chill resounded through the air. White gold ripples swept through the air, and a foot stepped out from the ripples. A white mask, a black robe, Genesis Supreme. Upon seeing this emerging figure, Wang Chong shivered, instantly raising his guard. The man who had emerged from the spacetime tunnel was none other than Genesis Supreme, who had lingered on the outskirts of the capital this entire time. King of foreign lands, we meet again. Right behind Genesis Supreme, the Tianfu Divine Lord appeared in a flash of light, his expression cold and his body glistening with the light of the stars. The two figures stood in the air, their robes dancing in the wind, their abundant energy radiating across the area and making them appear like overlords of the world. Wang Chong said nothing, but his heart sank to rock bottom. The thing he had worried about the most had occurred. Genesis Supreme had long awaited this moment, and the miniature 9 provinces domain was no longer there to stop him. Hurry! Protect His Majesty! Seize the rebels! The clattering of armor and marching footsteps drew closer and closer. A few moments later, the soldiers of the Imperial Army began to flood into the area. The avenues of the Imperial Palace were complex, and though there were 100,000 soldiers in the Imperial Army, they each had their own duty and were spread out across the palace. Despite the complicated layout, the Imperial Army had managed to react very quickly and had soon surrounded the area. Everyone, be careful. The Imperial Army is here. The escapees were thrown into panic and disarray. They had only managed to reach here by exploiting the element of surprise, but now that a large number of Imperial Army soldiers had arrived, their strength instantly appeared insignificant. Humph! The Tianfu Divine Lord coldly snorted upon seeing this approaching force. He waved a palm, immediately sending a wave of black energy speckled with starlight at the ranks of the Imperial Army. Ah! Several hundred soldiers were instantly blasted away, their weapons and armor blown to pieces by the frightening energy. For a peerless expert like the Tianfu Divine Lord, the strength of the Imperial Army was barely worth mentioning. Tianfu Divine Lord, cease this at once. An enraged Wang Chong lunged at the Tianfu Divine Lord. But after several dozen feet, a white-gold halo of spacetime imbued with annihilating spacetime energy expanded in front of Wang Chong. The tough and sturdy steps in front of Taiji Palace were crushed into powder by this halo of spacetime as if they had been made of tofu. Fortunately, Wang Chong had sensed the danger early and reacted quickly by stepping back, thus avoiding the fate of being sliced apart by this halo of spacetime. King of foreign lands, if I were you, I would not act so impulsively. In the air, Genesis Supreme flicked his finger, withdrawing his energy as he lightly spoke. Wang Chong did not reply, but his face turned into a nasty scowl. Tianfu Divine Lord, if you dare to strike, I will kill you. Not even Genesis Supreme will be able to protect you. Wang Chong looked past Genesis Supreme to glare at the Tianfu Divine Lord as he coldly spoke. Kill me? The Tianfu Divine Lord sneered. If you have the time, you should worry about yourself. The Tianfu Divine Lord coldly chuckled. But even so, he restrained himself and attacked no more. It was clear that Wang Chong's formidable strength in their last battle had left a deep impression on him. Done playing around? Genesis Supreme spoke in an aloof tone as he looked down on the palace, his hands held behind his back. If you're done playing, let's start talking business. Your Highness Crown Prince, you are truly a man who keeps his word. This Genesis Supreme admires you for that. Genesis Supreme glanced at Li Xuanta down below and smiled. Li Xuanta coldly grunted in reply, not caring to interpret the meaning in Genesis Supreme's words. Don't be mistaken. For releasing me, I agreed to work for you. This was a fair exchange, and now that the deal is done, we no longer have a relationship. Li Xuanta, such impudence. The Tianfu Divine Lord was infuriated by Li Xuantu's arrogant display. In this world, there was no one who could resist the Celestial God Organization. Even an extraordinary talent like Li Tai had died, let alone Li Xuanta. But to his surprise, Genesis Supreme waved a hand to stop the Tianfu Divine Lord. Enough! Your Highness Crown Prince is correct. This was an exchange, and now that both sides have fulfilled their end of the deal, everything is naturally over and done with. Genesis Supreme turned his gaze to Wang Chong. This subtle movement immediately drew everyone's notice, and Wang Chong swiftly became the center of attention, even Li Xuanta turning to Wang Chong. He had just caused a great stir in the imperial prison, but after destroying the Three Emperors formation, he had grown much quieter, taking the role of a bystander. Everyone could see that Genesis Supreme had come for Wang Chong. King of foreign lands, Li Tai is dead, but he still had something that belonged to us. This was a scarlet key object that is extremely important to us. If you hand it over, though I cannot guarantee your life, I can at least guarantee the safety of the capital. Genesis Supreme began to descend from the sky as if he was walking on an invisible staircase. Key! Wang Chong was surprised, his eyes focusing. Wang Chong had believed that Genesis Supreme had been lingering around the capital this whole time to deal with him, but it was now clear that he had come for something else. Was it that key? Wang Chong mentally remarked, thinking about the copper key in the golden box the sage emperor had left for him. But Wang Chong quickly rejected the idea. That key was used for opening the door to Li Xuantu's cell beneath the imperial prison. There was no way it could be the object Genesis Supreme wanted. Moreover, Genesis Supreme had said the key was scarlet, but the key Wang Chong had was copper. King of foreign lands, you are Li Tai's successor, and the people of the Great Tang call you the Son of Heaven's disciple. You are not claiming to know nothing about this, yes. Genesis Supreme stared at Wang Chong, observing the subtle shifts on his face as he spoke. Genesis Supreme, I have no idea what you're talking about, Wang Chong sternly said. Genesis Supreme's foot froze in the air, and then a moment later, bang! Stellar energy exploded amidst the ranks of the Imperial Army soldiers around Taiji Palace. Ah! Screams tore through the air as Imperial Army soldiers were blasted into the air, their severed limbs showering the earth. In terms of strength, Genesis Supreme was far more terrifying than the Tianfu Divine Lord. Bastard! Wang Chong was enraged. He had not expected Genesis Supreme to be even more callous and cruel than the Tianfu Divine Lord when it came to lashing out. King of foreign lands, this is just a small warning. You are the commander of an army, and I have heard that you cherish your subordinates. Thus, you must cherish the lives of these Imperial Army soldiers a lot, right? Hand over what I want and you can protect them, or else, humph, with the miniature 9 provinces domain broken, no one can stop us. My subordinates can enter the capital now, and if you continue to delay, it won't just be the Imperial Army soldiers dying, Genesis Supreme coldly said. Genesis Supreme. Wang Chong clenched his fists so hard that they cracked, his heart burning with anger. But Genesis Supreme was correct. Without the domain to keep them out, the men in black could freely enter and exit the capital. Wang Chong now faced a dilemma. King of foreign lands, this god only wants a small object, and that key was originally ours. Handing it over won't be much of a loss for you. You do not really want this god to start a massacre in this place. Yes. Genesis Supreme spoke slowly, but his voice was suffused with cold killing intent. Genesis Supreme, I don't know what this key you're talking about is, but I can guarantee to you that the Sage Emperor's greatest treasure he left for me was the miniature 9 provinces domain, and you've already destroyed that, Wang Chong sternly said. He was in an extremely disadvantageous situation. He had only been able to kill Firmament Supreme because more than half of Firmament Supreme's strength and focus had been on the teleportation gate. Wang Chong had been able to seize this weakness to use the giant energy core and the teleportation gate to heavily injure him. This had allowed the 3 divine embryos to battle with Firmament Supreme. But now, Genesis Supreme was unharmed and was at peak performance. Wang Chong had no confidence in dealing with him. Moreover, Wang Chong's strong intuition told him that Firmament Supreme had been skilled in psychic energy, but Genesis Supreme was more formidable when it came to pure power. And there's also Li Xuantu, Wang Chong said to himself. Though Li Xuantu had acted as a spectator after breaking the 3 emperors' formation, Wang Chong did not dare to forget about the deposed crown prince. Judging by what had happened, Li Xuantu had probably reached an extremely high level in the Grotto Heaven realm. When it rained, it poured. Wang Chong simply didn't have the ability to deal with 2 Grotto Heaven experts. If necessary, I'll have to use the stellar energy the Sage Emperor left behind. Wang Chong's heart was heavy as he tried to think of a plan. Before passing, the Sage Emperor had sealed a ball of near half-step divine martial realm stellar energy in Wang Chong's dantian. So long as he was willing, Wang Chong could unleash this destructive power. This was Wang Chong's ultimate trump card. But both Genesis Supreme and Li Xuantu could control spacetime. Unless he also had a grasp of the power of spacetime, Wang Chong would find it very hard to guarantee heavy injuries on them, even with the energy the Sage Emperor had left behind. If they avoided it, Wang Chong wouldn't get another chance. This was why Wang Chong had remained so cautious up until now. You don't know? Genesis Supreme was rather displeased by Wang Chong's answer. Perhaps my judgment was wrong and the King of Foreign Lands does not care as much about his subordinates as I thought. Or perhaps I have not killed enough people and your highness thinks I'm joking. You dare! Wang Chong was enraged. Humph! Is it your right to decide? With a cold snort, Genesis Supreme instantly unleashed a terrifying ball of energy that streaked like a comet toward Wang Chong's location. Kaboom! The earth was blasted apart, and more than half the Imperial Palace shuddered from the impact. But Genesis Supreme's mighty strike had missed. Genesis Supreme focused his gaze, surprised by this development. A voice rang out. "Humph, brat, you dare." It was Li Xuantu who had spoken. Boom! In a ripple of stellar energy, a black halo of spacetime appeared around Taiji Palace and slammed into the ground, upon which someone groaned. The battle that had taken place in front of Taiji Palace had been intense and brief. About 100 feet away from Li Xuantu and Genesis Supreme, Wang Chong suddenly emerged. His breathing was somewhat ragged and his expression somewhat hard-pressed. He had clearly suffered a loss in his battle with Li Xuantu, but he had not been heavily injured. Not only that, Wang Chong now had 3 figures standing behind him, all of them cloaked in black robes and exuding energy on par with Wang Chong. In fact, these 3 figures seemed to be 3 more Wang Chongs. Interesting, Li Xuantu said, his cold eyes glinting. He examined Wang Chong as if he was looking at him for the first time. Brat, this prince underestimated you. It's no wonder you were so confident in front of this prince. You managed to refine 3 powerful clones. Li Xuantu possessed outstanding once-in-1,000 years talent, and he also had a penetrating insight. With one glance, he could tell that the 3 figures behind Wang Chong were 3 divine embryos that possessed enormous innate talent. And they seemed to have special abilities. Just now, when Genesis Supreme had attacked Wang Chong had used the Earth Movement ability to move behind Li Xuantu and attempt to take back Li Heng. Alas, his enemy had been 1 step ahead, and though Wang Chong's sudden attempt had been surprising, Li Xuantu had still managed to catch on. But to Li Xuantu's surprise, when he used his power of spacetime to try to capture Wang Chong or heavily injure him, Wang Chong had combined powers with the 3 divine embryos to steadfastly block the attack. The situation on the battlefield was instantly reversed. With 3 divine embryos behind Wang Chong, even Genesis Supreme turned grave. For a person at Genesis Supreme's level, 1 Wang Chong was insignificant and could be easily slain. But 4 Wang Chongs, their bodies linked and capable of transferring energy between each other, was something that even Genesis Supreme had to take seriously. Not only that, when he saw those 3 black-robed figures, his eyes twitched. He had a vague inkling about something, but he wasn't quite sure in the time available to him. But Genesis Supreme quickly got a hold of himself. This operation had been delayed long enough. He needed to get that item as quickly as possible. King of foreign lands, it seems I was wrong. This Emperor of the Great Tang is who you're most concerned about. But that makes things even easier. Genesis Supreme chuckled, his eyes turning to Li Heng, who was in the grasp of Li Xuantu. Li Tai was dead, and the item he had left behind could only have been left to 2 people. It was either Wang Chong or Li Heng. It didn't appear that Wang Chong had it, based on how he was acting, so only Li Heng was left. Your Highness Crown Prince, it seems that it was right to cooperate with you. But you can leave what comes next to this god, Genesis Supreme said to Li Xuantu. If Li Xuantu had not been so sharp, Wang Chong really might have succeeded, and that Earth Movement ability of his was very troublesome. Genesis Supreme could still deal with him, but it would take some effort. Genesis Supreme felt that getting Li Xuantu to help him break the formation had been the wisest decision he had ever made. Hand Li Heng over to me. As Genesis Supreme spoke, he flicked a finger. Space trembled as a white-gold halo of spacetime appeared at Li Heng's feet. The halo exerted an enormous pull and began to pull Li Heng inside. At Genesis Supreme's level of cultivation, one could control spacetime. It was possible to capture someone without even taking a step, a feat accomplished with a single thought. Li Heng was Li Tai's appointed successor, and Genesis Supreme was sure that Li Tai had left some important objects to him before his death. That key was of utmost importance, and he had to obtain it no matter what. Stop! Wang Chong was alarmed by what he was witnessing. Li Heng was the new emperor of the Great Tang, and nothing could be allowed to happen to him. Once he fell into Genesis Supreme's hands, a mishap might lead the empire to break apart. Whoosh! Wang Chong shot forward, ignoring everything else and making his way toward Li Heng. But at this moment, just when everyone thought Li Heng would fall into Genesis Supreme's hands, withdraw. Li Xuantu, who had been playing the spectator this entire time, raised his hand, pulling Li Heng away from Genesis Supreme's halo of spacetime and preventing him from being taken. Li Xuantu, what are you doing? Genesis Supreme scowled, and the Tianfu Divine Lord behind him was shaken. They were allies with Li Xuantu. What did he intend with this abrupt action? Li Xuantu, don't forget who saved you, the Tianfu Divine Lord harshly rebuked. Li Xuantu's eyes were cold as he looked around and coldly said, of course this prince remembers, but don't forget that this prince only has a transactional relationship with you. You released me, so I destroyed the formation around the capital. Since this prince has fulfilled his promise, the relationship ends there. Everyone was struck dumb by Li Xuantu's words, even the escapees like Huang Xiaotian. There was no doubting the strength of the men in black. If Li Xuantu worked with them, it was completely possible to enthrone a new emperor. But this development was completely unexpected. This is bad. What is His Highness Crown Prince thinking? In the crowd, Huang Xiaotian felt an ill foreboding, and he turned his head to question that figure wearing the official's hat. But when he turned his head, he saw that the man was no longer there. Of course, Huang Xiaotian was far from the only one to have noticed the shift in relationship between Li Xuantu and Genesis Supreme. Wang Chong came to a sudden stop. He could tell that there had been a subtle shift in the situation, and it seemed as if things were developing in a direction he had never imagined. Li Xuantu, are you making an enemy of this god? Genesis Supreme was both shocked and angered. He had never imagined that the Li Xuantu he had gone through so much trouble to release would come back and bite him. Don't think that this prince doesn't know. You people have been opposing Li Tai this whole time, even controlling other countries from the shadows. Since this prince is out now, he naturally cannot permit you to control the Great Tang. Also, this brat is still useful and cannot be given to you. Besides, Li Xuantu paused a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had gone much colder. This prince has no interest in being anyone's puppet. Beneath the heavens and above the earth, there exists no one who can order around this prince. You! Genesis Supreme's shock and anger increased. Li Xuantu was really opposing them. They've fallen out. Wang Chong was astonished, but quickly, his eyes gleamed. The proud Li Xuantu fighting with Genesis Supreme first was undoubtedly a pleasant surprise. Wang Chong was in an extremely passive situation and was still thinking about how he could save Li Heng from Li Xuantu. But with this development, Wang Chong could relax for a moment. Both Li Xuantu and Genesis Supreme wanted Li Heng, so at least for now, Li Heng's life was not in danger. Very good, Li Xuantu. Genesis Supreme began to laugh from his extreme anger. I thought that we could settle things in a civilized manner, but since you've done this, I see no reason to continue being polite. Li Xuantu, whether you hand him over or not, this god will have Li Heng. As for you, Wang Chong, once this god captures you, I'll know for sure whether you speak truly or falsely once I interrogate you, and I will find out where that object is. Genesis Supreme's entire body radiated cold-killing intent. His robes rustled as waves of energy erupted from his body. Genesis Supreme had truly been enraged by Wang Chong and Li Xuantu. Wang Chong was currently secondary, as Genesis Supreme had never imagined that Li Xuantu would turn on him so quickly. But the strong eating the weak had always been the guiding principle of the men in black, and Genesis Supreme had never thought about winning the day through his words. Seeing Genesis Supreme reveal his killing intent, Wang Chong raised an arm and immediately called out, "Watch out! All Imperial Army soldiers, withdraw!" Whoosh! The dense ranks of the Imperial Army immediately began to recede like a tide. With the three emperors' formation broken, almost all the formations in the Imperial Palace had lost effectiveness. And people of Genesis Supreme's and Li Xuantu's power could sunder the earth with their might, and cause massive losses in the Imperial Army with a single attack. Losses that were completely unnecessary. Retreat! Fuming Lingcha and the others also sensed danger and called for a retreat. The Imperial prison escapees were in the most awkward situation. Advancing was difficult, and at their backs were the dense ranks of the Imperial army. What left Fuming Lingcha and the others most confused was that they had come to support Li Xuantu onto the throne. But Li Xuantu always went off on his own, and it was impossible to tell what he was thinking. In front of Taiji Palace, Li Xuantu cared nothing about Fuming Lingcha's group. He didn't even bother glancing at the Imperial prison escapees. Genesis Supreme, this prince has no intention of fighting with your group, but I advise you to not provoke this prince. In this world, no one can order me around. Li Tai could not, and you certainly cannot either, Li Xuantu coldly said. Genesis Supreme sneered. Did Li Xuantu really think that some words from him could resolve everything? He had never intended to let these people go. It was fine if Li Xuantu handedly hung over, and if he didn't, then he would just move up his plans and take care of them all in one fell swoop, paving the way for annihilation. He could also purge the Central Plains early, allowing the purification plan to proceed much faster. Li Xuantu thought that he could sit on the same level as him? Too naive. Without the miniature 9 provinces domain stopping him, no one in the capital could oppose him. Not knowing your own strength. Genesis Supreme's reply to Li Xuantu's words was terse, and a moment later, he struck. Bang! The inner court of the Imperial Palace shuddered as heavy shockwaves of energy swept out from Genesis Supreme's position. But surprisingly, Genesis Supreme's first attack was not aimed at Li Xuantu, but Wang Chong. Buzz! Behind Wang Chong, 3 white gold halos of spacetime appeared, right beneath the feet of the 3 divine embryos, and swiftly contracted. At the same time, a giant white gold bell appeared above the 3 divine embryos. The giant bell's surface was covered in mysterious symbols. The sun and moon, birds and beasts, mountains and rivers, insects and fish, symbols that represented the laws of the world. Besides that, there were also carvings of many formations. The moment this bell appeared, it began to descend on the 3 divine embryos. Genesis Supreme had a penetrating insight. Li Xuantu had been able to tell at a glance that Wang Chong's clones were 3 divine embryos. So how could Genesis Supreme not recognize such precious treasures? If he managed to get them, then with his Grotto Heaven Realm cultivation, he could advance them to the Grotto Heaven Realm even faster than Wang Chong. And if he captured the 3 divine embryos, Wang Chong's fighting power would plunge, and he would lose any hope of contending against Genesis Supreme. Bastard! Wang Chong mentally cursed. He had not expected Genesis Supreme to be so sinister and despicable. Though he had been speaking to Li Xuantu, appearing to be about to fight with him to the death, when he truly took action, he had targeted the weakest of the 3. Genesis Supreme, you're truly shameless. Wang Chong angrily roared, thrusting a palm at the giant bell hanging over the 3 divine embryos. At the same time, Divine Embryos 2 and 3 poured all their energy into Divine Embryo 1. Great destruction art. Wang Chong didn't have many moves that could disrupt spacetime energy, but the Great Destruction art was one of them. A powerful man could beat 10 martial artists, and while Wang Chong's Great Destruction art couldn't open spacetime passages or control space, through pure brute force, it could shatter the surrounding space. Boom! With a heaven-shaking boom, the area where the 3 divine embryos were standing darkened, and then space shattered like a mirror, opening up into a space-time black hole. This destructive power had a hindering effect on the giant white gold bell and the halos of space-time Genesis Supreme had placed under the 3 divine embryos. They paused for a moment, and Wang Chong seized the chance to have the 3 divine embryos sink beneath the earth and avoid the fatal strike. Genesis Supreme's eyes flickered for a moment. Amongst these supreme experts, Wang Chong was the weakest, but he was also the one with the most surprises. I'll spare your life for now. Upon seeing that Wang Chong and his 3 divine embryos had all vanished into the earth, Genesis Supreme stopped his pursuit, his face chilling as he turned to Li Xuantu and Li Heng. Buzz! Suddenly, Genesis Supreme's body blurred, and then he vanished. On the ground, Li Xuantu sensed something, and his eyes became as sharp as blades. The moment Genesis Supreme disappeared, he shook his body and vanished as well. For a moment the world was quiet, But the next moment, bang! Several dozen feet from the ground, two severed arms extended out of the void, their palms clashing. Kaboom! The world swayed as a shockwave infused with the laws of the Grotto Heaven realm swept out from Taiji Palace. Ah! With cries of alarm, the ones nearest to the clash, the dragon guards and General Li, were swept up like leaves. They were not the only ones caught up in the shockwave. Fuming Lingcha, Duanjuyen, Huang Tianzhao, and the imperial prison escapees behind them were all struck and sent flying like ragdolls. The weaker prisoners were thrown several dozen feet through the air and vanished into the crowd. Hurry and retreat! The eyes of the imperial army soldiers in the distance widened in fear. They finally understood why Wang Chong had ordered them to retreat. The power unleashed by the clash of these two was simply unbelievable. Not even the dragon guards could withstand the shockwave, let alone others. If they had maintained their encirclement, the imperial army would have probably suffered grievous losses. Bang! On the south side of Taiji Palace, a group of imperial army soldiers watched as white gold and black energies hurtled toward them, fear on their faces as they accepted their deaths. But in a flash of light, Wang Chong appeared in front of them and blocked this energy with his palm. "Hurry and retreat!" he gravely ordered, the hair at his temples flailing in the wind. "Yes, Your Highness." The soldiers retreated in a panic. Wang Chong stood there and grimly looked at the most intense point of spatial disturbance. Li Xuantu and Genesis Supreme were both more frightening than he had imagined. Taiji Palace was barely able to withstand the shock, and cracking and groaning was coming from inside the walls. The countless defensive, strengthening, stronghold, and reinforcement formations that had been built into the walls had been the work of numerous inscription and formation masters, and even the Sage Emperor had worked to further reinforce the walls. But the impact of Grotto Heaven stellar energy and the crushing power of spacetime energy was shattering these inscriptions and formations with astonishing speed. Once half of the nearly 1 million formations and inscriptions within the walls had been broken, it would mean the end to the several-century history of this palace that had served as the heart of imperial authority. These two are far too powerful. Wang Chong focused his gaze on the two figures in the air. Dark silhouettes appeared in the air as pitch-black and white-gold halos of spacetime collided against each other again and again, their collisions creating steely clangs. From Wang Chong's perspective, there were at least 5 illusory figures at Genesis Supreme's position. Each one was Genesis Supreme. This was not purely a matter of speed. Genesis Supreme was using Grotto Heaven laws to open up 5 halos of spacetime, 5 short-distance spacetime passages which he was constantly moving between. The 5 Genesis Supremes exerted a formidable pressure on Li Xuantu, mighty attacks capable of sundering mountains approaching from all sides. If not for the unique composition of Taiji Palace, the area would have been turned into flat ground long ago. On the other side, Li Xuantu's body was engulfed by a dark shadow. His moves were clean and straightforward, each attack imbued with immense power. His chilling eyes were as sharp as swords, not even the shadows able to conceal it. These were unforgettable eyes that would leave a mark on the minds of whoever saw them. Li Xuantu was proud and arrogant, whether in battle or at any other occasion. Genesis Supreme found the wrong person. He shouldn't have had Li Xuantu break the formation. Wang Chong commented to himself, his heart in turmoil. While Li Xuantu had helped him break the 3 emperors' formation, he had also brought his own set of troubles. Li Xuantu was a man who would never bow to another. Not even the Sage Emperor imprisoning him for decades had been able to wipe away his pride, let alone this newcomer Genesis Supreme. He would not be controlled by anyone. However, a moment later, Wang Chong frowned, his heart sinking. Li Xuantu is no match for Genesis Supreme. While the battle in front of Taiji Palace was intense, in reality, Li Xuantu was being suppressed this whole time. After a moment of thought, Wang Chong understood what was going on. While Li Xuantu was talented, he was still young compared to a monster like Genesis Supreme, who had lived for thousands of years. His understanding and grasp of Grotto Heaven laws was far inferior to Genesis Supreme's. It was already very impressive that he had held off Genesis Supreme for so long. "No, I have to help him," Wang Chong's heart thumped in dismay. He summoned his 3 divine embryos and vanished into the earth. When the lips were gone, the teeth would feel cold. Genesis Supreme reigned supreme over the rest, and once Li Xuantu was defeated, it would be Wang Chong's turn. Bang! A few moments later, when the battle between the 2 Grotto Heaven experts had reached its maximum intensity, a furious roar came from beneath Taiji Palace. Your Highness Crown Prince, let's work together. Great destruction art. Wang Chong's 3 divine embryos each placed a hand on Wang Chong, their energy surging into his body. Boom! When the 4 Wang Chongs combined their strength, the world paled. You dare! Sensing this energy about to erupt from the earth like a volcano, Genesis Supreme grimaced. Not even he could disregard the combined might of 4 Wang Chongs. Supreme unity style. His eyes widening, Genesis Supreme raised a palm, a giant white gold halo of spacetime appearing on the ground and moving toward Wang Chong. But surprisingly, just when Wang Chong was preparing to focus entirely on dealing with Genesis Supreme's attack, another attack came from the side. Stand aside. This prince needs no one's help. Bastard. Li Xuantu, you're crazy. Wang Chong was enraged. He had been moving toward Genesis Supreme in the air, but now he was forced to descend back to the ground. Even though he was clearly helping Li Xuantu, to his surprise, this bastard was joining Genesis Supreme in attacking him. Wang Chong had never expected this. This prince works with no one. Get out of here. I can deal with this bastard alone. Li Xuantu's icy voice came from the heavens. Seeing that Wang Chong had fallen back, he did not press the issue, calling back his attack and continuing his fierce battle with Genesis Supreme. Back on the ground, Wang Chong had turned ashen. He had gone out of his way to help Li Xuantu, but this fellow was so proud that he did not permit anyone to assist him. If he had not reacted quickly, he might have even died to that bastard's palm. Your Highness, what do we do? A voice whispered into his ear. At this time, the heavily injured Zhao Fengchen and the other grand marshals had arrived. They were all badly injured, but the determined imperial army marshals had managed to save them. Taiji Palace was of extreme importance, and Li Heng even more so. Even though they were all heavily injured, they still struggled on. It's you guys. Wang Chong noticed the arrival of Zhao Fengchen and the others. Seeing how badly they were wounded, Wang Chong felt his heart thump. He then glanced at Li Xuantu in the air, and his eyes flashed in understanding. Looking up at the intense battle in the sky, Wang Chong sternly said, "Don't rush. His Majesty's life isn't in danger. I have a plan." He began to pensively look at Li Xuantu. The battle in the sky was extremely intense. 2 storms of stellar energy revolving and howling as they clashed and separated again and again. At times, their space-time energies intersected together into a massive and terrifying 2-colored storm. Shattered tiles, bricks, jade steps, weapons, and pieces of armor were swept up by the storm and then sent raining down over the area. The falling debris was accelerated to frightening speeds by the storms, becoming as sharp as swords. They plunged deep into the ground and exploded, shattering even the tough palace bricks, and cries of alarm rang out from all sides. The surrounding Imperial Army soldiers had already retreated very far, but upon seeing this, they fearfully retreated even farther. The same was true for the Imperial prison escapees. But Wang Chong had no time for such things. His attention was entirely on the pair in the center of the battlefield. Wang Chong discovered that even he was being affected by this fierce battle. He was unable to clearly see the 2 of them, let alone find the right opportunity to intervene. At their level of cultivation, even subtle realm experts found it hard to keep up. Buzz. A moment later, Wang Chong's eyes flashed, and he entered the world of energy. This isn't enough. Their law energy is so strong that it's even starting to affect the world of energy. Wang Chong said to himself. Looking through the world of energy should have revealed the true face of the world's myriad energies, seeing how they flowed and their strength. But even though Wang Chong was now looking through the world of energy, he could only see dark and gloomy energy, everything covered in a veil. And his vision was still blurry, some invisible energy preventing him from seeing the truth. This was the power of grotto heaven laws. When it came to space, not even the world of energy could see the truth. Whoosh! Wang Chong opened and closed his eyes, and with a bright flash, he activated another eye ability. True World. Finally, after the True World ability was used, the thin veil was lifted, and countless thin slivers of energy, all of them in complete chaos, appeared before Wang Chong's eyes. These thin strands radiated out from the two experts, so numerous that they seemed to engulf the entire world. The world of laws. Wang Chong's heart trembled as he realized what was going on. Those chaotic lines were really the law energies that were omnipresent in the world. He recalled that he had never been able to see such a thing when fighting the Tianfu Divine Lord, but now, when he opened his eyes, he could see the laws. It must be the work of Firmament Supreme's law energy. Wang Chong realized what was going on. That he could now see this bizarre world was entirely because of Firmament Supreme's grotto heaven law in his body. When it fused with his True World ability, it produced this Eye of Laws. Buzz. Slowly, information on various laws began to drift into Wang Chong's mind like snowflakes. As these snowflakes accumulated in his mind, Wang Chong began to comprehend more and more about the laws of the world. What a pity! This is probably the basic Eye of Laws. It's not very strong, or else I would be able to receive information much more quickly, Wang Chong said to himself. He quickly turned his gaze upward. He had not forgotten that his goal in using the Eye of Laws was not to comprehend the laws of the world, but to observe the battle between the pair so that he could find the right time to save Li Heng. Humph! As Wang Chong looked up, Genesis Supreme sensed his gaze and coldly snorted. He flicked a finger, upon which an invisible energy erupted from his body, turning into a formless mist that obscured his body. Li Xuantu also seemed to sense something, his brow slightly creasing. The laws around him distorted, transforming into an invisible barrier that blocked Wang Chong's gaze. These fellows are too strong. They can even sense my gaze. Wang Chong's heart trembled. But Li Xuantu and Genesis Supreme were apex experts, and no one at this level liked being spied on. Not only that, Wang Chong sensed something very familiar about the fog surrounding Genesis Supreme. And Yaluishan, during the Feast of All Countries, and Yaluishan was able to block the senses of my true world. I thought that this was the doing of some ritual tool, but now, it seems that it was the work of Genesis Supreme. Wang Chong's mind was whirring. In the sky, as Genesis Supreme and Li Xuantu used their law energies, the world in Wang Chong's vision dimmed, and if this continued, he would not be able to intervene in their battle. However, a moment later he felt a strange sensation. It's the three divine embryos. Wang Chong immediately found the source of this oddity. Not far from Wang Chong, the three divine embryos had been influenced by Wang Chong into also looking at the sky. But unlike Wang Chong, their vision was unaffected, and they were clearly seeing something else. Wang Chong sensed what they were seeing and smiled. Without the slightest hesitation, he accessed the vision of his three divine embryos. Buzz! A moment later, Wang Chong could now see what the three divine embryos were seeing. The vision of the three divine embryos was extremely similar to the Eye of Laws, though it was from three different angles. And unlike Wang Chong's original body, the three divine embryos were not impeded by laws or any fog. Genesis Supreme and Li Xuantu were unable to stop their vision. And the three divine embryos could see the law energy filling the world much more clearly than Wang Chong. Divine embryo eyes. Wang Chong was delighted. Divine embryos were manifestations of the laws of the world, nurtured over many years. They were instinctively very sensitive to law energy. But Wang Chong had tested their abilities before, and they had not been this impressive. After a brief moment of thought, Wang Chong understood. Firmament Supreme's Grotto Heaven Law stimulated their abilities. Grotto Heaven Laws touched upon spacetime, which stood at the apex of all law energies. Just like with his True World ability, the divine embryos had evolved after interacting with this powerful law, their potential stimulated. Not even Li Xuantu and Genesis Supreme could stop them. This was because the three divine embryos were created through accumulated law energy, were essentially a part of the laws. After observing the battle for only a few moments, Wang Chong felt a waterfall of information rushing into his mind, and his understanding of Grotto Heaven laws grew more and more. The Grotto Heaven realm involved the laws of spacetime and was vast and complex, far more than any mortal could comprehend. Even a genius like Li Xuantu, who had broken through several decades ago, was still comprehending the power of spacetime and completing his Grotto Heaven core. Though Wang Chong had yet to advance to the Grotto Heaven realm, this vast amount of information was still of great aid to him. At the minimum, it would mean that he would encounter much less resistance when he did make his attempt at the Grotto Heaven realm. Boom boom boom. One frightening explosion after another rocked the earth. Li Xuantu and Genesis Supreme were both pushing their Grotto Heaven energy to its limits, storms of black and white engulfing the area of their battle. Wang Chong stood nearby while using his origin immortal barrier, standing like a rock against the beating waves, his eyes focused on the sky. In just a few moments, Wang Chong had reaped a significant harvest, his understanding of the Grotto Heaven realm's spacetime law advancing by leaps and bounds. It was as if two Grotto Heaven realm teachers were displaying all their techniques before him as a method of instruction. With the three divine embryos granting Wang Chong three different perspectives, Wang Chong was able to get an extremely comprehensive look. No other martial artist could achieve this sort of feat. And as Wang Chong's understanding of the spacetime law increased, the Grotto Heaven laws within Wang Chong and the three divine embryos began to accumulate and approach completion. Genesis Supreme is stronger than Li Xuantu, but Li Xuantu is too proud. Even if Genesis Supreme is suppressing him, he will never back down, nor will he admit defeat. Wang Chong slightly frowned. From his perspective, he could see that Li Xuantu was accumulating wounds from Genesis Supreme's attacks, and even his organs had been injured. But he continued to stand tall in the air, battling against Genesis Supreme with all his might. If this continued, Li Xuantu would be so heavily injured that he wouldn't be able to stand anymore. Even worse was that if Li Xuantu were defeated, Wang Chong would be like a single block of wood trying to hold up a falling gate, and in the end, he would be defeated by Genesis Supreme too. Suddenly, bang! As two different halos of spacetime clashed, tearing open a black fissure in front of Taiji Palace like the fabric of space was made of paper, and Wang Chong frantically tried to think of a plan. A familiar voice whispered into Wang Chong's ear. "Wang Chong, can you hear me?" It was a voice so soft and inaudible as to be almost lost in the midst of the intense battle. But when Wang Chong heard it, he trembled in shock. "Your Majesty!" Wang Chong raised his head, his eyes scanning the air, as did Wang Chong's three divine embryos. Crack! Another black spacetime fissure appeared, and as Wang Chong turned his attention to it, he glimpsed a yellow dragon robe for a split second. Li Heng! Wang Chong's brows creased as he recognized the robe. Li Xuantu was incredibly strong, and Grotto Heaven realm experts could open spacetime passages wherever they pleased. In order to prevent others from taking Li Heng from him, Li Xuantu had concealed Li Heng in one of these spacetime passages. In this way, not even Wang Chong could do anything. But over the course of Li Xuantu and Genesis Supreme's battle, one spacetime fissure after another was being torn open through the battlefield, thus occasionally tearing open the spacetime passage in which Li Heng was hidden and giving Li Heng a brief opportunity. Wang Chong listened to me. On the other side, noticing the four Wang Chongs looking at him, Li Heng seemed to understand that Wang Chong had heard him and began to hurriedly speak. "What I have to say next is extremely important. The 9 heavens, 10 earths, 3 emperors formation beneath Taiji Palace hasn't been destroyed at all." "What?" Wang Chong's entire body shivered at this news. How could this be? Wang Chong's face was covered in shock and his mind was a sea of turmoil. Li Xuantu was a member of the imperial household and a former crown prince, so he knew the 3 emperors formation like the back of his hand. This was precisely why Genesis Supreme had sought him out. Even though Genesis Supreme had quickly set about dismantling the bridge after crossing the river. Earlier, Wang Chong had seen with his own eyes Li Xuantu punch at the ground and destroy the 3 emperors formation, the miniature 9 provinces domain with it. But now, Li Heng was telling him that the formation wasn't broken? Wang Chong's first reaction was disbelief. If the 3 emperors formation wasn't destroyed, Why had the miniature 9 provinces domain been broken? What had Li Xuanta done with that punch? That was just too unbelievable. But Wang Chong also knew that a sovereign did not speak lightly. Li Heng had once been crown prince, and now he was the emperor whose words were law within the realm, and he was also a benevolent soul. There was simply no way he would lie about something like this. But Li Heng was only at the Saint Martial realm. How could he have seen something that Wang Chong had not? Li Xuantu and Genesis Supreme continued their battle. With one punch, Genesis Supreme blasted Li Xuanta back more than 1,000 feet. The immense force which pushed Li Xuanta made the air explode like a giant wave, sending shockwaves throughout the palace. Li Xuanta sprang forward, unleashing a terrifying wave of sword chi that traveled toward Genesis Supreme with inconceivable speed. At this time, Li Heng spoke again. I don't know what's going on either, but I sense that there's some dragon chi in the 3 Emperors formation that's resonating with me. I don't know how to describe it to you, but I am certain that the 3 Emperors formation has not been destroyed. Before Li Heng could finish, he grunted and vanished again. If you don't want to die, be a little quieter for this prince. Li Xuanta coldly snorted, apparently sensing that Li Heng was up to something. Wang Chong mentally trembled. He could tell that while Li Xuantu had sensed Li Heng was trying something, he did not know what exactly Li Heng had said. Dragon Chi? The 3 Emperors formation contains the Dragon Chi of the Central Plains. Li Heng's words allowed Wang Chong to come upon a stunning revelation. Even though Li Heng was weak only at the Saint Martial realm, he was the master of the Central Plains, the Emperor of the Great Tang. The moment he inherited the throne, he had obtained the power of the Dragon Chi. If he was saying that the resonance of Dragon Chi indicated that the 3 Emperors formation was not destroyed, then it had to be the case. Besides, what Li Heng said, if true, would also explain why only emperors and their chosen heirs could control the 3 Emperors formation. Li Heng was the emperor, so it was only natural that he knew the truth behind the 3 Emperors formation. As a former crown prince, Li Xuantu also knew how to control the formation. Moreover, the 3 Emperors formation had a major connection to the ancient Yellow Emperor, Shenyuan. As it had been laid down by an emperor, it made sense for it to contain Dragon Chi. This would explain why, for thousands of years, only the emperors had ever been able to control the 3 Emperors formation, with others not even capable of interacting with it. But why would Li Xuanta do such a thing? And Wang Chong had seen him break the formation firsthand. Wang Chong's mind rapidly spun, and a few moments later he understood. There are only 2 possible reasons the formation wasn't destroyed. The first is that Li Xuantu intentionally did not destroy the 3 Emperors formation so that he could trap Genesis Supreme, or perhaps he wanted to keep it around so that he could use it for himself once he took the throne. The second possibility is that the 3 Emperors formation is far too powerful. Several thousand years of accumulation is impossible to destroy, and the formation was built by the Yellow Emperor himself, and it fused with the Dragon Chi of the Central Plains ages ago. It was already built with defenses to prevent its destruction. The users should only be capable of using it or shutting it off, not destroying it. As violent streams of energy howled around him, Wang Chong continued to think. For the first option, Li Xuantu was still a crown prince and extremely proud. He valued his word highly, and since he had agreed to help Genesis Supreme, he would not go back on his word and attempt to trap him. This left only the second option. It wasn't that Li Xuantu didn't want to destroy the formation, but that it couldn't be destroyed. Li Xuantu had merely shut it off. If the 9 heavens, 10 earths, 3 emperors formation had been that easy to destroy, it would have been lost at some point in its several thousand years of history. As Wang Chong pondered all of this, he realized that there was a chance. Both Li Xuantu and Genesis Supreme are threats to the Empire. If I want to change this situation, I have to get the dragon token representing the Emperor from Li Xuantu. Then, through Dragon Chi and the token, I can reactivate the formation. An imperceptible light flashed in Wang Chong's eyes. Wang Chong did not have imperial blood, nor was he the Emperor of the Great Tang. In normal circumstances, he should not have had Dragon Chi, but he recalled how, during his clash with Yaluishan at the Feast of All Countries, some of the Dragon Chi Yaluishan had been stealing had ended up in his body. In terms of Dragon Chi, Wang Chong naturally couldn't compare to Li Xuantu, and certainly not Li Hong, but he truly did have a little. If Dragon Chi was the key to opening up the Three Emperors formation, then so long as he took back the token, he would have a minuscule chance of reactivating the formation. And once it had the energy of the Three Emperors formation, the miniature 9 provinces domain would reactivate, upon which everything would change. Wang Chong looked at Genesis Supreme with a completely different expression now. I have to find a way to get back the dragon token and save Li Hong from Li Xuantu. Wang Chong's expression became resolved. At this moment, a groan came from above, and then the battle between Genesis Supreme and Li Xuantu took a turn. Bang! Genesis Supreme spread apart his feet, his robes flapping around him as his body exuded a divine white light. As he looked down upon the world, he fiercely punched. This one punch shattered all the pitch-black halos of spacetime around Li Xuantu, an enormous strength breaking through all barriers to slam into Li Xuantu's chest. Li Xuantu could no longer hold on, and he shot down from the heavens like a cannonball. Not good. Wang Chong was stunned. His plans could not keep up with the rapidly shifting situation. Li Xuantu had clearly reached the end of his rope. If Li Xuantu fell, the dragon token and Li Hong would fall into Genesis Supreme's hands, leaving Wang Chong alone to fight against Genesis Supreme. Genesis Supreme would defeat both of them one after the other. Li Xuantu, in opposing us, you're truly seeking death. As Li Xuantu plummeted from the skies, a bone-chilling voice came from Taiji Palace. Behind Li Xuantu, a figure appeared like a ghost, joining with Genesis Supreme to attack Li Xuantu from both sides. The Tianfu Divine Lord. Wang Chong's pupils constricted. Everyone had been completely focused on Li Xuantu and Genesis Supreme during this battle. As for the Tianfu Divine Lord, he had been a spectator for so long that even Wang Chong had stopped paying him much attention. But the Tianfu Divine Lord had not been as much of a bystander as he appeared. He had been seeking an opportunity this entire time, and he now seized it to attack Li Xuantu. In the past, the Tianfu Divine Lord would have been far too weak to do anything to Li Xuantu. But Li Xuantu was now badly injured and completely suppressed by Genesis Supreme. A sudden attack from the Tianfu Divine Lord at a time like this was unquestionably lethal. I can't let him succeed. Wang Chong's expression turned grave. Whoosh! A gust of wind blew past, and at that very moment, Wang Chong and his 3 divine embryos disappeared. Winds howled in front of Taiji Palace as a figure plummeted to the ground. Li Xuantu was in a disastrous situation. Despite his shocking cultivation, he was no match for a man who had lived for thousands of years. Not only that, the intense clash of spacetime laws had had an enormous impact on Li Xuantu's grotto heaven core. Southern Dipper Holy Spear. A furious roar erupted from behind Li Xuantu, and a powerful energy locked onto him. Spacetime trembled as a dark spear that glistened with starlight, its handle embedded with a formation representing the 6 stars of the Southern Dipper, emerged and shot toward Li Xuantu. The dark spear flew forward with immense force, packed with pure destructive might. As the spear flew forward, invisible energy sealed Li Xuantu's surroundings. Obliterate! The Tianfu Divine Lord's gaze was sharper and fiercer than the edge of a sword. The Southern Dipper Holy Spear was a divine weapon meant for the 6 divine lords of the Southern Dipper, and it was only used when fighting extremely powerful opponents. This divine weapon was extremely exhausting to use, and as its use involved law energy, each time it was used, a supreme needed to consecrate it with their grotto heaven core, and one needed to expend a significant amount of stellar energy and essence blood. Thus, it was normally left at the main church. Not even the Tianfu Divine Lord dared to use it carelessly. It consumed a truly astonishing amount of energy. Simply carrying it around constantly consumed his subtle realm stellar energy. However, after consecutive defeats at Wang Chong's hands, the Tianfu Divine Lord was forced to mobilize this holy spear that had taken the combined might of 6 divine lords to forge. After a basic consecration from Genesis Supreme, the Southern Dipper Holy Spear had been restored to its original and awesome might. The Tianfu Divine Lord had been waiting a long time to unleash this one spear. There was no way Li Xuantu could block this abrupt attack. We'll kill you first, and then that brat will join you. The Tianfu Divine Lord mentally spat. The Southern Dipper Holy Spear was originally meant for Wang Chong, but it didn't matter now. If Li Xuantu died, Wang Chong, this renowned war saint of the Great Tang, would be nothing but an ant for Genesis Supreme. The spear shot out as quickly as lightning. Facing this attack from behind and Genesis Supreme's oppressive attacks from the front, even Li Xuantu grimaced. A true talent. Alas, you insisted on opposing this god. Genesis Supreme's cold voice rang out in his ears. Boom! A massive torrent of stellar energy descended from the heavens, and a giant, white gold halo, its surface covered in complicated inscriptions, appeared next to Li Xuantu and enclosed him. This was not a simple halo of space-time. It was a halo of binding. This was a technique Genesis Supreme had developed specifically to use against Grotto Heaven Realm experts. Genesis Supreme had not developed it for use against Li Xuantu, but at this time it was the ideal move. Heaven's plan could not be altered, and Yaluoshan was the chosen master of the world, the future Supreme Emperor of humanity. Genesis Supreme had never been sincere when he promised that he would help Li Xuantu onto the throne. Killing him first would be removing this problem ahead of time. A mortal trying to oppose a god? Truly not knowing your own strength and seeking death. Genesis Supreme's body radiated cold energy, and his eyes looked at Li Xuantu as if he was already dead. If his Grotto Heaven core was sealed, Li Xuantu would be no different from an ordinary human and would pose no threat. Just when it seemed like Li Xuantu was going to die to the combined assault of Genesis Supreme and the Tianfu Divine Lord, Genesis Supreme felt a strange situation, and his eyes widened as he turned in the direction he had felt this peculiarity from. As if sensing Genesis Supreme's movement, a familiar and jeering voice exploded in his ears. Humph! Genesis Supreme, I truly overestimated you. Colluding with Li Linfu is one thing, but you even need to work with your subordinates to deal with Li Xuantu. One person, though he came as 4 people, suddenly emerged from one of Genesis Supreme's halos of spacetime and appeared next to him. Impossible! Genesis Supreme turned around to take a glance, and then his body trembled. Wang Chong. The one intervening in this battle at this moment was none other than Wang Chong. The ones stepping out of the halo of spacetime were 4 identical Wang Chongs. For Wang Chong to appear like this was something that not even Genesis Supreme had expected. Genesis Supreme would not have been at all surprised if Wang Chong had traveled through the earth, flown through the air, or even used some powerful ritual tool to approach, but he had never expected Wang Chong to use one of his own spacetime passages. Genesis Supreme had not opened up any spacetime passages near Wang Chong, and his surroundings were full of the fierce and dangerous laws of the world. Even someone with a body of diamond would be cleaved apart by this invisible barrier. But Wang Chong had managed to avoid it and enter a halo of spacetime through some inconceivable method. This was not something a subtle realm expert could do. Trying to force one's way through without forethought would result only in death. Only someone who had comprehended at least some of the laws of spacetime could accomplish this. But how could Wang Chong have done this? As these thoughts flew through his mind, Genesis Supreme quickly took action, his left hand extending forward and attacking Wang Chong. Ripples appeared in the air as tensome white gold halos of spacetime of various sizes appeared, and swiftly worked to grind Wang Chong into dust. At Genesis Supreme's level of cultivation, complicated techniques were no longer needed. A simple halo of spacetime was imbued with enormous power, whether it was for slicing or crushing. A small halo of spacetime had power equal to the full-strength strike of an average subtle realm expert, and this was even greater for a large halo of spacetime. The annihilating power of spacetime had always been the greatest. But while Genesis Supreme had reacted quickly, Wang Chong had reacted even more quickly. Before Genesis Supreme's attack could hold him, Wang Chong's original body, Divine Embryo 1, and Divine Embryo 2 used the same technique that had been used on Firmament Supreme. Heaven and earth created as one. The myriad things annihilated together. Bang! 2 pairs of suns and moons appeared, one on the left and one on the right. After that, another sun and moon appeared, with this final pair serving to link the 2 other pairs, exploding with light. As the 3 pairs of suns and moons fused together, they fiercely exploded. Bang! With an enormous boom, a destructive wave of energy engulfed the region. Wang Chong had grown more familiar with this supreme technique of the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art after using it on the shores of the Caspian Sea. With the combined might of these three, its power could not be ignored, not even by Genesis Supreme. Before Genesis Supreme's halos of spacetime could even finish forming, they were annihilated by Wang Chong's ultimate technique. Genesis Supreme grimaced. He had calculated that only a part of his energy would be needed to suppress Wang Chong. Genesis Supreme, at his level of cultivation, no longer took puny subtle realm experts seriously. But Wang Chong's move transcended the subtle realm, almost reaching the basic level of the Grotto Heaven realm. It was a terrifying attack that was clearly not something Genesis Supreme could use only one hand to deal with. "Brat, you're seeking death." Genesis Supreme chilled in anger. He was already focused on dealing with Li Xuantu. How could he not be enraged over Wang Chong now helping Li Xuantu? Rumble. With a thought from Genesis Supreme, an even more powerful wave of stellar energy erupted from his body. Even some of the energy he had been using to deal with Li Xuantu was being moved over to deal with Wang Chong. But despite this, the enraged Genesis Supreme had still underestimated Wang Chong's ability. Genesis Supreme at his peak was not something that Wang Chong could deal with, so he had never planned on his ultimate technique defeating Genesis Supreme. Wang Chong had joined with Divine Embryos 1 and 2 simply to pave the way for Divine Embryo 3. Ice-sealed world. Divine Embryo 3 shot out from behind Wang Chong's original body, seizing this opportunity created by the others to erupt with a freezing azure light, unleashing its powerful innate ability. In a blue flash of light, the world around Divine Embryo 3 was sealed in frost. But unlike before, while the temperature around Taiji Palace did plunge, the power of the cold wave was focused on the surrounding hundred-some feet. At this moment, everything within the ice-sealed world was frozen solid. The surging Grotto Heaven stellar energy that Genesis Supreme had unleashed at Li Xuantu, the halos of spacetime, and even Genesis Supreme's body were all frozen. Wang Chong's ice-sealed world was incredibly powerful. The power of this innate skill was linked to the laws of the world, and it transcended the bounds of mortal stellar energy. Wang Chong had been able to freeze Firmament Supreme on the shores of the Caspian Sea, and today he was able to freeze Genesis Supreme. But Wang Chong also knew that Genesis Supreme was unharmed, unlike Firmament Supreme. His ice-sealed world was much less effective and would probably work for about half as long. An excellent chance. At this moment, Wang Chong prepared to use the near-divine martial realm energy that the Sage Emperor had left for him. This was his only chance to deal with Genesis Supreme. Crack. At this moment, a soft crack came from the center of Wang Chong's ice-sealed world. At the same time, an icy voice that seemed to come from the depths of the underworld rang out in Wang Chong's ears. "Brat, you didn't think that would be enough to deal with me, did you? To dare to use such lowly tricks against me. Not even 10,000 deaths can redeem you." The owner of the voice seemed to be gnashing their teeth in extreme rage. Upon hearing this voice, Wang Chong trembled and raised his head. In the center of the ice-sealed world, he saw that an ancient bronze mirror had appeared 3 feet in front of Genesis Supreme, its surface covered in mysterious symbols. And from this mirror, Wang Chong sensed intense ripples of law energy. Most importantly, this mysterious mirror had unleashed a powerful defensive barrier that had enclosed Genesis Supreme and blocked the power of Wang Chong's ice-sealed world. The surface of the defensive barrier had been covered with a thick layer of ice by the ice-sealed world, but Genesis Supreme within was completely unscathed. Whoosh! Wang Chong's heart sank to rock bottom. This development was one he had never imagined. The ice-sealed world had failed to hold down his opponent, and if Genesis Supreme managed to dodge the trump card the Sage Emperor had left for him, Wang Chong would have nothing left. "Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." At this moment, even Genesis Supreme's white mask seemed to be twisted from his rage. Bang! The bronze mirror in front of Genesis Supreme flashed with red light, and then a tyrannical stellar energy burst out and shot toward Wang Chong's head with thunderous speed. Not good. Wang Chong's heart shivered as he instantly changed locations. Divine Embryo 1 held the front, its body covered with the sturdy black celestial armor. Meanwhile, Wang Chong summoned his heavenly mandate battle armor and placed it on Divine Embryo 1. At the same time, all 4 Wang Chongs summoned their Trayastrimsa heavens, fused them together, and began to pour energy into Divine Embryo 1. Divine Embryo 1 did not have a body of flesh and blood. Its unique constitution, 2 suits of divine armor, and 4 Trayastrimsa heavens that could convert and absorb external attacks served as Wang Chong's strongest defense. In terms of pure defensive power put together, they reached at least the basic level of the Grotto Heaven realm. And after all this was done, Genesis Supreme's terrifying attack descended. Ah! Several screams rang out, together with a heaven-shaking explosion. Wang Chong and his 3 divine embryos were slammed to the ground by the bronze mirror's power, blasting out several holes in the jade steps of Taiji Palace and sending cracks rapidly spreading across the ground. The nearby Li Xuantu was also caught up in the attack. However, Wang Chong's surprise assault had succeeded in its aim. Bang! A thick-black halo of spacetime appeared behind Li Xuantu, just barely managing to block the Tianfu Divine Lord's Southern Dipper Holy Spear. The tip of the spear contained horrifying power, and wherever the tip went, the fabric of space cracked apart as if it was solid ground. But in the end, it could not break through Li Xuantu's halo of spacetime. Seeking death, Li Xuantu pushed out his hand, and a mighty blow instantly blew the Tianfu Divine Lord through the air and into the walls of Taiji Palace. Shortly after that, Genesis Supreme's attack arrived. Li Xuantu managed to hold for only a few moments before his defenses were also shattered by the bronze mirror's horrifying power, and he was slammed into the ground. But Li Xuantu still managed to emerge in a better state than Wang Chong. You actually forced me to use the space-time mirror. Genesis Supreme's furious voice came from above. The space-time mirror was a treasure granted to him by heaven. It massively boosted his power of space-time, but for various reasons it could only be used 3 times. Heaven had long ago said that the space-time mirror should only be used when absolutely necessary. 3 chances were essentially 3 extra lives. Once they were all used up, the bronze mirror would shatter. Genesis Supreme had already used it once, back at the Feast of All Countries. Worried that Li Tai had some sort of trick or would pursue him, he had been compelled to use the mirror's power. But this time, Wang Chong's ice-sealed world had once more forced him to use the mirror's defensive powers. He had now used the space-time mirror twice. Since that's the case, I'll kill you all. When the time comes, I'll seize your souls, read your memories, and find out all the same where the key is. Genesis Supreme's voice resounded like thunder through the world. Bang! Genesis Supreme snapped his fingers, upon which a metallic pearl of dark gold emerged from the space-time mirror. This pearl rapidly expanded to the size of a fist, and ancient, tiny formations within it began to resonate. This pearl flew over Li Xuantu's head and instantly froze him to the spot. A law creation. As Li Xuantu looked up at the space-time mirror above him, he paled. In this world, there were unique treasures that contained extremely powerful law energies, and they were called law creations. Each law creation had an extremely powerful and unique effect. Subtle realm experts could only wish to obtain these precious treasures. And the metallic pearl that Genesis Supreme had summoned was even stronger than other law creations. Because, containing the power of spacetime, it was a spacetime creation. The moment Genesis Supreme summoned the pearl, the space around Li Xuantu became as rigid as steel and extremely difficult to move through. Li Xuantu couldn't even open a spacetime passage. Besides that, the space energy within the pearl also disrupted his Grotto Heaven core and stellar energy. The binding power radiated by the pearl and the power of the ancient formations within it restricted him to a very small region. Li Xuantu's heart sank, and he instantly felt a great peril approaching him. In a duel, even against Genesis Supreme, Li Xuantu would not show weakness, let alone admit defeat. But when it came to treasures, not even when Li Xuantu had been the crown prince, almost the ruler of the realm, had he ever been able to compare to the fortune of the men in black. At this moment, rumble, the world thundered and howled. Floating in the air, Genesis Supreme threw out the space-time mirror, upon which the mirror rapidly swelled from the size of a palm to 100 times that size, transforming into a mountain of a mirror that threatened to seal Wang Chong and Li Xuantu beneath it. Crack, crash, lightning, flames, ice, and wind all appeared on the mirror and spiraled downward. All space within several thousand feet was sealed, the space-time laws transforming into giant chains that pierced through space-time and turned this region into a cage. No one except Genesis Supreme could use the power of space-time in this region. Not only that, the power of the mirror was locked onto Wang Chong and Li Xuantu, a weight like 1,000 mountains pressing on their bodies, and this pressure was multiplying as the mirror descended, squishing them down. Whoosh! The immense force was utterly suffocating. Swish! Wang Chong stood on the ground, the pressure pushing his feet through the white jade stairs. On his body, his blood vessels bulged outward and twisted. In the blink of an eye, the skin on his arms, legs, neck, and back broke open, blood gushing out. Even with his body's current toughness, he was still unable to resist the frightening pressure from the space-time mirror. Cackrack! At the edge of the space-time mirror's area of effect, silver snakes of lightning crackled down, and even the foundation of Taiji Palace trembled. Cracks could be heard as the white jade bricks began to sunder apart, spraying shards of debris everywhere. Wang Chong scowled. He knew that Genesis Supreme had to have some trump cards, but he had not expected this trump card to be so powerful. At this moment, Wang Chong and his 3 divine embryos were all paralyzed. Wang Chong tried to mobilize his stellar energy to resist this unstoppable pressure, but all of his stellar energy was pressured so much that it felt like it had nearly solidified. Bang! With another boom, the giant mirror increased in size again and continued its descent. Pa! Wang Chong's original body still stood tall, but divine embryos 2 and 3 were forced to their knees, the ground shuddering as they hit the floor. Your Highness! Hurry up and open the formation! Wang Chong called out, his face turning red as he clenched his teeth and tried to hold fast. The pressure from above was getting stronger and stronger, like the sky itself was coming down on them. The strength of a Grotto Heaven Realm expert was on full display, and even though Wang Chong had seized 80% of Firmament Supreme's Grotto Heaven core and was close to the Grotto Heaven Realm himself, there was still a massive chasm between him and a true Grotto Heaven Realm expert like Genesis Supreme. He couldn't last much longer. In the air, Genesis Supreme stood above the massive spacetime mirror as he worked the power of the ritual tool beneath him. Suddenly, he heard Wang Chong's cry, and his eyes twitched in ill foreboding. Genesis Supreme's brow rose as he harshly called out, "Formation? What formation? Brat! What are you talking about?" But Wang Chong ignored him, his eyes turning to Li Xuantu, who was also facing the same enormous pressure. There wasn't much time left. Once the spacetime mirror landed, they would both be dead. But on the other side, Li Xuantu appeared hesitant. He wasn't looking at Wang Chong, and he appeared to be thinking about something. "Your Highness, what are you still waiting for? If you don't act now, we're all dead," Wang Chong harshly said. Li Xuantu remained silent, his face somewhat inscrutable. Earlier, he had pushed away Wang Chong and stopped him from helping him deal with Genesis Supreme, even saying that he never worked with anyone. Wasn't following Wang Chong's advice now essentially slapping himself in the face? Everyone was astonished by this sight. Not even Zhao Fengchen and the other Grand Marshals, who were attacking the seal from the outside to try and help Wang Chong, knew what he was talking about. At this moment, no one was more shocked than Li Heng, still ensconced within one of Li Xuantu's space-time passages. Li Xuantu couldn't move, so neither could he. What is the king of foreign lands thinking? Li Heng was perplexed. He was in a grim situation. Once the mirror fell, he would die with the others. But all of his attention was focused on Wang Chong. He had already informed Wang Chong that he had confirmed the existence of the 3 Emperors formation through Dragon Qi. But what was Wang Chong trying to do here? Was he pleading for Li Xuantu to help him open the formation? Had he forgotten who had shut off the 3 Emperors formation in the first place? If not for Li Xuantu, they would have never been in such a perilous situation. This man was wicked to his bones. He had lost to the previous emperor in the Divine Dragon coup, and he had now finally escaped. This was no easy character to deal with. This person couldn't be believed, much less worked with. Genesis Supreme focused on the two of them. As he saw Wang Chong look again at Li Xuantu, the two of them seeming to share some tacit understanding, his face darkened and his mind began to spin. Formation? What sort of formation was left in the imperial palace? Even if there was some other formation, how could it possibly save them? Trying to escape when the space-time mirror had locked the area down? Ridiculous. But a moment later, a thought occurred to him that made him tremble all over. Could it be? Although the imperial palace had tens of thousands of formations, there was only one that could help Wang Chong and Li Xuantu out of their predicament, and if it was really as he imagined, then it meant, as Genesis Supreme continued to think, he felt for the first time a deep fear and unease. A long night was prone to many dreams. Regardless of what plan Wang Chong and Li Xuantu had, he could just kill them to ensure that it never happened. Space-time shifts. Worlds converge. Die for me! Genesis Supreme coldly shouted as he chanted a spell and made a small wound on his finger. A drop of golden essence blood appeared, which he flicked onto the giant space-time mirror below. With the power of the essence blood, the space-time mirror exploded in power. As the mirror shuddered, the air howled for tens of thousands of feet around, and the mirror accelerated downward. Once this mirror made impact, even if Wang Chong and Li Xuantu had bodies made of diamond, they would not be able to escape being crushed into powder. Wang Chong was burning with anxiety. Li Xuantu was far too proud to an obstinate level. Even when facing death, he still grimly clung to his pride. But the dead had no dignity or pride to speak of. Yet there was no way such arguments could convince Li Xuantu, or else he wouldn't still be hesitating about opening the formation. Wang Chong could only try another avenue. Your Highness, what are you hesitating for? Hurry and open the Three Emperors formation. Back then, not even the Sage Emperor could do anything to your Highness. Does your Highness plan to lose to this Genesis Supreme, who couldn't even defeat the Sage Emperor? Lose to a lowly Grotto Heaven Realm expert? Wang Chong anxiously roared, his voice rumbling across Taiji Palace. Li Xuantu's body trembled at these words, an imperceptible light flashing in his eyes as he raised his head. Finally, Wang Chong's words had worked. In a flash, all hesitation in Li Xuantu's eyes vanished, replaced by unprecedented rationality and obsession. Death? He did not fear death, but what meaning was there in dying to someone like Genesis Supreme? He would be a laughingstock. In his heart, he had only one enemy, the deceased Li Tai. He was stronger than Li Tai. Li Tai could crush this kind of an ant with a flip of his hand. How could he lose to it? He needed to prove that he was stronger than Li Tai. Li Xuantu finally spoke. Brat, I just can't stand this bastard. Don't think I'm doing this to help you. His voice was as cold and aloof as usual. He was like a tall and lonely pine tree, proud and tenacious. As he spoke, his eyes focused and he made his move. Bang! As the terrifying pressure from the space-time mirror descended, Li Xuantu gripped the dragon token and erupted with a furious roar. Open up! Just when the space-time mirror was about to crash down, Li Xuantu gathered up all his energy into the dragon token, tensed his body, and punched at the ground beneath him. Crack! Crack! The power of Li Xuantu's punch pierced through the earth, traveling all the way down to the ancient 9 heavens 10 earths 3 emperors formation. Rumble! An energy howled out of the earth, an eruption of such force and power that even Genesis Supreme shivered in fear. Li Xuantu, you dare! Bastard! You dared to deceive us! The furious cries of Genesis Supreme and the Tianfu Divine Lord resounded over the earth. The 9 heavens 10 earths 3 emperors formation. The two of them were extremely familiar with the energy of this legendary formation. This energy was in the midst of awakening, spreading out along the lines of the formation to the rest of the palace. And as the 9 heavens 10 earths 3 emperors formation awoke, so did another frightening formation. That was Wang Chong's miniature 9 provinces domain. Impossible! Genesis Supreme was in disbelief. He was as familiar as could be with this formation, so familiar that he couldn't help but shudder. He had held the advantage this entire time, but in a flash, just when he was about to take the lives of Wang Chong and Li Xuantu, the familiar energy had burst out and frozen his attack. Whoosh! Before Genesis Supreme could move, the distant Tianfu Divine Lord had already taken action. Genesis Supreme was still hesitating, thinking that there was still a chance to kill Wang Chong and Li Xuantu. But the Tianfu Divine Lord saw that the situation was bad and began to flee. The Tianfu Divine Lord was moving so quickly that he created a sonic boom, leaving a long white trail in his wake. Genesis Supreme ignored the Tianfu Divine Lord, an unfathomable light in his eyes. He quickly made up his mind, clenched his teeth, and continued to operate the space-time mirror. Victory was right before his eyes. How could he relinquish such an excellent opportunity? The Three Emperors formation had not completely activated. As long as he could kill Wang Chong and Li Xuantu, he would be the ultimate victor. Bang! The space-time mirror exploded with light and continued to descend toward Wang Chong and Li Xuantu like a giant millstone. But Genesis Supreme's hesitation had made everything too late. Just when Wang Chong's body was about to break from the pressure of the space-time mirror, buzz! The capital quaked, and invisible ripples radiated from Taiji Palace. After what seemed like 10,000 years for Wang Chong, the 9 Heavens 10 Earths 3 Emperors formation finally activated, and Wang Chong once more felt the familiar energy of the miniature 9 provinces domain. Success! Wang Chong's eyes flashed. Wang Chong instantly linked with the miniature 9 provinces domain, and that omnipresent energy came under his control. Ha ha ha! Genesis Supreme, it's finally my turn. Wang Chong's excited voice resounded across the entire palace. Bang! Wang Chong made a simple punch, and a moment later, a vast amount of energy surged out of the ground. Ah! A scream came from the distance as the fleeing Tianfu Divine Lord was struck by this tsunami of power. It was a vast energy that was far above the subtle realm. With barely any time to react, the Tianfu Divine Lord was obliterated by the formation's power as if he was just an ant. His body turned to fine powder.